Thanks for joining us this morning, guys, or this afternoon in Limerick time. Look, I think kind of the intro that I'd sent to Fergal kind of introduced Evy to you, but it probably didn't even begin to scratch the surface. I'm delighted to have Evy with us this morning. Evy is the social and audience lead at the Toronto Star, is what the blurb said, but in reality, she's all of that and a whole pile more. It's not far off to say that Evy is kind of the beating heart of the Toronto Star, certainly in my time there. I've been blessed to work with some great journalists in my career, but I don't know if there's one that I've learned so much consistently from in such a short space of time as Evy. We all know that journalism is changing a hell of a lot and changing before our eyes. And yet Ev is kind of just someone that rolls with those changes, continues to excel and drags half of a newsroom and some people who are less ready for change along with her. I gave you guys a small sample of like some of her work that she does with Millennial Money and the In Their Own Voices series at the Star. She also has her own podcast. And there's a whole pile more than that. We said that Evy will discuss writing for social platforms and how social platforms can help your writing. And in truth, it'll be kind of all of that and a whole pile more. We're kind of just blessed to have kind of 50 minutes of the full Evy experience as such. So I'm going to hand it off to Evy, to be honest. Fergal's recommendation is to keep cameras off for now, but we will have time for a Q&A at the end. We'll make time for sure. If there's any questions you have as we go, that you think of as we go, you can put them in the chat. But honestly, let's just ask them face to face at the end. I think it's much more personable for myself and Ev as well, rather than looking at a bunch of initials and circles. But yeah, so if we want to kind of keep cameras off for now, and then we'll make time for Q&A and everyone can turn on the cameras for that. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it off to my good friend, Evy.
Hi, guys. I'm really excited to be here. And Joe didn't pay me to say this, but he was one of the best managers I've ever worked for. So together on our desk where we try to expand audiences using tools like social media, which all of you, I'm sure, you're familiar. That's the thing that we're born into, becomes a really useful tool. So I thank Joe for allowing me to speak with you guys today. And please, at any time, you can write your questions in the chat and we'll get to it at the end, but it'd be great to obviously see your faces. So I'll get right into it. When I share a screen, I think I'll disappear, but that's totally fine. One thing I'll just preface that I'm 27, so I'm not too, maybe that's just who I am, where I don't want to be in this traditional news world. Things are changing and we are just trying to catch up with it. And so there are so many great things to take from, these amazing journalists that have paved the way and have done stuff their way for a long time. But, getting into there, you guys have an upper hand because you understand new technologies, you understand social media, you understand storytelling that applies to you that may not be so guarded. And so that's what I always do here, because I'm always trying to expand to really diverse populations, which in Toronto we have a lot of, but also younger people, which has been a struggle in Canadian media. So that's just something to understand. I do think that applies for, across the world, trying to get younger people into news. So first I'll talk about social writing, because I think it's actually in 260 characters, especially on Twitter. I feel like that's an art that we are trying to nail down, and we've done a great job, advancing and testing things. So let me share my screen and we can go through it there. First off, I'll give you the inside look into the Star's, all their social accounts, and we're actually going to build something together. So let me know if you guys, Joe, you can see that properly, right?
Yeah, can see it perfectly, Ev. That's great.
Okay, perfect. And so when we first started, when I picked up this, I would say I started as a social media assistant. When we picked this up, we had about 600,000 followers, which is not bad, but I think it's fine. Like for us, we're Canada's biggest, circulation paper. So these are just that kind of steps and the kind of innovations that we've done to try to push to that million mark. And we're really proud to have reached there and in just a few years. So that's something that, all news publications and news organizations, and even beyond it with brands and stuff, having a good grasp of social media, whether you're telling a sports story, whether you're telling, a news story or whatever it may be, is something that people are really looking for these days. So it's really great to learn all these things. So I'll go through it. So we do something called Twitter Moments. And if any of you guys have Twitter, you guys generally will have the What's Happening bar over here, which you all can see. And then the Explore page. And so for us at the Star, since 2 years ago when they started introducing news moments, Twitter moments, which is what these things are for news publications, we wanted to jump on it right away. So we were the first in Canada as a news organization to try these things. And what has come of it after 2 years are lots of page views, lots of more eyes, new audiences. And what's really important to note that also throughout this, we are showing our presence on Twitter, which is a huge tool to use. Instead of moving away from social media, it's like a partnership that has gotten us not only tons of page views, which is a big important metric if you end up working in newspapers, because people need to see that your story is driving views, but also that it brings subscriptions as well. And that's something that we only introduced, I would say, 5 years ago. And that's getting people to pay for news, which has always been a little bit of a struggle here because we implemented it a little bit late. So let me give some examples. So from this page, on the Explore page, you can see that the Toronto Star is taking up these spaces. Whether you're in, there's a UK team that does this for UK media, but if a story, is really a great explainer on COVID, let's just say, they might put it global. So even if you guys tried, with the Limerick, with your own brand to create these, I think you might get eyes across the world. And that's just really interesting to know, and great to hear from different perspectives. And again, getting those page views and also connecting with people and humans across the world. So I'm going to show you all the moments we've created so you can just take a look, and then getting into how these moments are crafted and how they're created so they give enough for the reader to click into the link and engage with us without giving the whole story away. So I'm going to pull up our moments, and this is how you can find moments. You go into more and press moments, and I'm going to actually make one with you guys live, so it's going to be kind of fun. It's a sports story that our reporter Braden, editor actually, Braden, who is also close friends with Joe, wrote. And this is just the kind of storytelling that different storytelling that we do. So these are all our moments. Basically, they're a compilation of tweets. So whether it's a Twitter thread, whether you're grabbing from someone else's tweets to show the entirety of a story, this is what we kind of put together to amplify our stuff on social media. And by far, Twitter has been the most important and interesting and flexible news tool for us. So I'm going to go into something that happened, just recently. It's something that's been happening, but let me grab that story for you guys so you can take a look on how we put this together. So as we know, anti-Asian violence has been, prominent during these COVID times, but even before that. And so we needed to highlight these stories. One caveat with these kind of stories and why we put them up and why it's really important is because this is a population that perhaps doesn't speak English the best. They don't have means of social media sharing their story. They're afraid of law enforcement, and that's something we know from talking to them. And so when we amplify their stories on a tool like this, perhaps people will get to understand these kind of lived experiences. The thing about news and social media is that even in our own newsrooms, we need to fight to have more representation. It doesn't reflect our newsroom, frankly, not yet, and not in Canadian media or US media. But we do these things and we amplify and choose these human stories to give perspective and allow people to see it. So when we put this Twitter moment together, we usually put a thread together. So a thread is basically we tweet once and we add 4 more parts to it. In my best practice, if we're trying to amplify a story that you guys write, let's just say it's an investigation or something that you really want to put light to, a 5-part thread is the most effective that you can do. It's basically, whether you're a reporter talking about your experience behind the scene reporting on a certain topic. So for example, we went through, 30 documents to find out this news story. It really shows and breaks the fourth wall for the reader to say, wow, reporting is hard. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So that could be part of your thread if you're someone who's writing from your own voice, tweeting by yourself. But if you're working for the brand, what we find really effective at the top is a real quote. People just want to hear from the humans. I could say as much as I could telling and explaining the story. And I do. We add more, stats and all this stuff like that. But really, when we compare a great tweet with let's just say the story is really great, it has a lot of great quotes first will always do a lot more for people. And there's always a debate, is a shorter caption better, is a longer caption better? We've tried both, and what I really find is the longer caption giving a bit more context, so people have a full grasp, just knowing that not everyone might understand the topic and those things. we don't mind giving a longer caption. It's actually been better for us as for page views. Of course, there's things where maybe it's a short poll, or maybe it's a short story and you have a really great headline. That's also appropriate to use in a caption too. But basically, we just don't always want to replicate the headline here that you already see displayed. So we're trying to look into the story, find those nuggets that are really golden, that tell the human story, backing up with a bit of data. And then that's basically how we come across this. So I'll show you the thread that was written for this. So right now we have the perspective of a person who's speaking in here with some hard stats, like that's a crazy number. Always emphasize numbers when you can see like crazy data. And that's usually what we have as journalists. We get into, a professional or an expert in the field who's saying, this has been happening. It's always been a thing. It's giving you perspective, and always trying to tag people that are part of the organizations. They're there to help amplify your stuff too. Tagging, I would say, is one of the most important things if it works with what you're doing. So for us at the Star, we might not tag politicians unless they're writing something for us, right? Like, because then it's kind of free press. Like, we want to know that, we're writing about a certain policy, so we might not tag our premier or prime minister. But when it comes to like these organizations and experts, that's totally fine. And you're going to see that you do that a lot with doctors and epidemiologists who are taking a huge chunk of the Twitter space these days. Third piece we got is just another perspective from someone who's talking about, like when we talk about anti-Asian violence against women, the places that in the Atlanta hate crime was basically targeted because they're massage parlors, which comes with a whole history too. So giving that background so people can kind of, try to understand where these advocates are coming from when they say, okay, the victims of these crimes are usually they're voiceless, really. They don't have the platform, they don't have anything, but getting into that nugget and understanding why that is. And we also have different, what's happening, and then basically more quotes. And I think that's a really powerful way to do the thread because it gives so much in the human voice with some expertise. So I would say, again, if you're trying to promote your own story that you've written, a 5-part thread is like the best thing that you can do, especially if you can break the fourth wall and you're talking as yourself, like as Joe Callaghan saying, I interviewed, 50 people for this story. This is what I learned and all this stuff. People love to hear how a journalist actually works. And an example to point to is it's funny, but the Washington Post TikTok, which I don't know if you guys have seen, he gives a lot of background of the funny nuances of working in a newsroom, right? Or working at home at this time. Yeah. And people just don't understand. The thing that I want to emphasize is that, like, in journalism, we work so hard to create a story. That whether it's hard or not, we interview people and we talk to a lot of people. People don't know how we really got there. So it's always really enlightening for people to know how much work got put into it. So, and not even as a brag, but just so people know, like, especially the push for us to get subscriptions. It's like, this takes work. It's work, right? So it's we want people to know it actually takes a lot of work. So this piece, so we added all the 5 parts of the thread here. And then after that, we also added some of the older stories that we've worked on from some of our reporters. So Joanna Chu, who's out of our Vancouver bureau, has written on these crimes. We want to remind people this is from April 22nd, and things obviously haven't changed. If not, they've gotten a lot worse with the stats that we're reading. So these are just the real instances of, racially motivated attacks in Vancouver against Asian populations. Just bringing them back up to see like the progress that's been going on. And basically the point of the story is that there still isn't enough that hasn't addressed it. And that's what all the experts are saying. So we'll add some stuff.
They're almost, those added tweets, they're almost like sources in a story, right? So like, yeah. if we're kind of describing this Twitter moment as a story in its own right, or a way of storytelling, you're bringing Joanna and your own kind of experience in there. They're almost like sources in a story itself, right?
Exactly. And that's a great point, because really we're just trying to add, the thing is, like, we also compile lots of stuff. So, you might be you might be a beat writer whose focus is, covering a certain sports team, but you've written so much on it, but unfortunately the people aren't, they can click on your author page and read a bunch of stuff, but let's just say you're doing a big investigation into a sports team, and there's so many developments throughout the year, and social is a great space, especially with Twitter moments, to compile all those moments so people can see, wow, this hasn't just been covered today, like, you've been working on this for a long time and you have a lot of coverage on it. And so For the Star, that's something that we really try to show all of our archival processes, to show, oh, we've been on this since day one, and we want to just give you all the angles and all the different types of things. So all these tweets are from a while ago, like November 1st, but it's off the story that was really recent. So we just add them all, like Joe said, as sources. And again, each of these, they give the human story. Giving the photos of the people is always going to be better than no photos, especially on social. Like, the click rate just goes up way higher when we have photos of real people. And that's something to be mindful of when you're creating for your own website or the news organization. Generally, we always want photos of people if it's possible. And so that's one of the examples, and it did like exceptionally well. Not something crazy that knocked it out of the park, just because there's so many news organizations, the New York Times, Washington Post, that had moments that were similar. But what we're doing here was basically giving the Canadian angle, because there's this whole weird divide where, like, in the US something happens and then Canadians are so quick to say that's not us. So, just giving the actual context and enlightening that kind of story. And another example is something that we did with COVID, which I think a lot of, whether you're in sports or whether you're in other types of journalism, explainers are going to be a part of your life, like, to another level, where you're going to have to write things like, this is what the vaccine, like basically in plain words, breaking down a whole really complicated medical vaccine study. So people are like, okay, like maybe that'll combat hesitancy with the vaccines, or, just so people can learn different things. And this is a project that I put together with two of the digital designers that we have, where we got people in different languages sharing the reason why they got vaccines, and then giving that translation in hopes to combat vaccine hesitancy. So if you guys don't mind watching it, this is a story that we knew that we had to use videos in. So that's something that's kind of interesting. And essentially the piece is, we have 20 plus people speaking their own language, because Canada is incredibly like a diverse place. We have people that don't have English as their first language. And so this piece was trying to combat vaccine hesitancy. And so this thread, we actually often, when we make these Twitter moments or ask people to social the threads, it does come from the Star, which is our main account, but it does a lot better when it comes from the actual reporter. That reporter has so much knowledge of what went on in the story, more so than us. Like, they have the nuance behind the story. So I put this together just because that's a story that I worked on, and it's something that was important. And near the end, I just give my real take on it. And the real take is, I went through lots of videos, and I think I said this here. I spoke with many who chose not to get the vaccine. In some communities, it was difficult to find those. And so I'm giving that extra knowledge, more so than what the project actually is, of when I was putting this together. And so using this and using social media to find these people is something I'll talk about later with the Represented by the Raptor story. But it's something that's just vital to us. And so when I was putting this thread together, I wanted to put examples of the different people. So we have the LTC residents, and using videos on Twitter, in Twitter moments, or just as, just tweeting with a video, is really effective for people. It's a totally different medium that breaks up the algorithm of just seeing text. So it just really is something that's refreshing and does help with these kind of things. And so I gave the example from an LTC resident. She's 93 years old. We want to see like an older person who's not in healthcare who decided to get it. We got someone who's Indigenous, who, there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy with our Indigenous populations because of past Canadian, like, I would say, like, genocide to those communities in Canada. And so we need to hear from them. And he's being completely honest. And so there's 20 videos, but these are the ones I decided to highlight in social to try to cover as much as I can. Along with the Black population in Canada, there is vaccine hesitancy as well, because, again, a distrust in healthcare and our governments. So we get these leaders to kind of be able to be that shared content on social, so people can amplify and see this and share this with their friends. It's just a useful piece. And then one in South and Punjabi, just because our South Asian population was one of the hardest hit by COVID-19. A lot of them are the ones who work as essential workers. So just choosing which pieces to use for social to highlight the bigger story. I'm not going to put all 20 stories, all 20 videos on social. You don't want to give it all away, but just enough so people can get the gist of it. And so when you actually click into it, which we got a lot of clicks from Twitter mostly, it was from people who were grandchildren of people who spoke Cantonese or grandchildren of people who spoke Spanish, and they wanted to share with their grandmothers and stuff. So this was a piece that, if you actually look into it, like I said, there's tons of videos in different languages. But when we put it out on social, we just put as much as we needed to, I think. And doing that is and addressing those main points in your story of why you collected and why you put it together is something that we usually, that's what we want to do with this kind of stuff. So I would recommend anyone, with stories that you have, to just try making a thread and try finding out those major points of your story without giving it all away.
It's almost a story, Evy, that, you thought of, or maybe I'm more asking the question rather than saying it, but it strikes me as a story that you kind of thought of as social first. And then it also works really well on the website. And you've kind of spoken to whoever was able to put together that great matrix of videos. But it is a kind of great example of a story that, even in its very conception, is social media first.
Yes, definitely. And often, I think the one that Joe sent you, represented by the Raptors, which I'll get into, was that as well. It was really supposed to be, especially this one, because it was more of like a PSA. So like, there's been a whole thing in Canada where our governments aren't doing enough to combat these vaccine hesitancies. So we had to think social first, which is a place where people really, there is misinformation, but it is a place where you can get free information, right? That's a place where maybe people who can't afford to understand why the vaccine is helpful or, dispel their fears, that's where the story really came from. So, taking those clips and having people share them with their family, their relatives, that was really important to us. And so I'm talking about Twitter at this moment and how we shared it on Twitter, but we put that on our Instagram, which I'll get into. We put that on our TikTok. We put that on all these different channels that we just want to expand as much as we can. So we cover a wide audience of people, whether or not they're able to afford the subscription at this time to our newspaper. This was just a piece that needed social to amplify it. And so that's where we thought of first, audiences and social. So I can quickly show you how to put this together. And I'm doing it just because our Braden, who is one of our sports editors, put a story together and put a thread together. So we can actually see it in practice. So let's take a look at the moments. So I created this. How you create it is that if you go in here and you press moments, you press this little lightning bolt. That should open up a new moment that looks like this. I've already set this up so you can take a look, but here. So we'll edit this. And so it's basically kind of like a blog. You're writing sort of a blog just using tweets, though, on Twitter. So it's short headline and a little description and a photo. So we already got Braden, who's our sports writer, to put together a thread. So he put a 5-part thread together using some photos, using cool GIFs. And this is on, let me put this in. So basically, to add a tweet to the moment, you just click this little check mark. So he already wrote the tweet for us, which is great. And so you're just adding parts to it. And let me just add these. And this is why our team on social and audience is quite small. So when we can get the reporter to help us, it helps us a lot. And again, they have such great information on it that it won't be as genuine or real without the reporter really giving that story. Of course, it's hard sometimes, I'll get into this after. It's hard sometimes to get reporters to sign up to this, especially older reporters, but I give, and Joe knows this, but I give training sessions to them because I'm like, you know what, it's necessary. And one thing I'll point out is it's great that you did your story. It's think about all the hard work you did to get your story to the place where it is. Why would the last step where you can actually amplify it be the part where you stop? And that's a lot where reporters do stop. They're like, okay, that's enough. A lot of the older ones too, I don't need to share this, the story's done. But then you lose eyes on it when you really could have way more eyes on it as long as you know how to post it or try ways to amplify it. So for me, it's really important when you're thinking of the story, crafting it from where that vaccine PSA in different languages was my idea. It started with not seeing that enough on social and not getting enough information. And then you write it and you edit it and you do all those things. And then at the end, you still got to amplify it. So that's what I really want to stress to everybody. Storytelling doesn't end when the story's published. Hopefully on your team, you can find ways to amplify it on social media. It's really important. Okay, so this story is on a profile on a Leafs goalie, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. And Leafs is like, that's our team. Like the Toronto Maple Leafs is our team, and just learning more about who he is. So this is just a cool sports profile.
Yeah, he's the guy who kind of came in over the weekend, and has kind of been like almost looks like he might be the goalie the rest of the season, right? So that's kind of why we're doing it.
And he's kind of like the fourth line person, right? He's not the first pick. I think the first two picks, like the people that are on the team all the time, they're injured or they're not playing.
Yeah, and they're injured and struggling. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is just your more of a regular dude. Of course, he can play, like this level hockey, but he's just a guy who got called in. So now this is what the story is about. So we choose a cover just like you would if you're publishing anything, which I find important. And videos work on Twitter for this moment. So I'm just going to set this cover. You'll see it move once it actually goes live. And so we can set that. So great, that's funny. So that's fine. And then the moment we can look at the story. And so let's see what story that, oops. It's a very short character count. So like, again, with headlines, it's really, really short and it's kind of tricky. So usually I try to take our own because I think that's a pretty good headline. Has Beckham always been this nice? And we can craft this together. So if you guys have ideas, but really it's so short. So, and the thing is like he has a thing of he's known to be nice. But we can just say the Leafs, more on the Leafs. Oh, would you say new goalie or just goalie?
Like I guess he's the new goalie because Freddie is injured. So, if anyone has any suggestions, but I think it's kind of like, he's like their feel good new goalie.
And he's super nice, and that's the thing with him. So we'll use this headline if this actually fits, and then we can see how it does throughout the day. You can always edit it, so that's really great. And then we just add just a little bit on it. So we could just add a little description. So we can just take some of what Braden has done. But anyways, like this is basically how you put it together. And it's really important, this tool, because like I said, New York, it's part of if you work on a social desk anywhere, they want you to have this on mind. They want you to, if you say, hey, I know how to make a Twitter moment, that will elevate your resume by a next level, just because that is what everyone is moving to. And truly, like, New York Times has procedures now where they do, okay, we make 10 moments a day when we send 10 moments to Twitter. And so it's a very normal social procedure, and that needs to just like becoming bigger and bigger. So that's kind of where this.
And it's the kind of it's the kind of tool, Evy, that like the guys through Limerick Voice could be using. And, it's a great one to kind of play around with. I don't mean to kind of denigrate it by saying play around, but playing around and learning with it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the one that will give you those kind of results if the manager or whoever is looking for great social page views or whatever. This is the one that does that. Whereas like I'll talk about Instagram, TikTok shortly, but those are more brand facing. So you're building a brand really compared to this. So let me just put this up. I think we can go with that and then publish it. And we publish it, we tweet it. And often I like I said before, tagging our reporters. So they can also amplify it themselves as well. So story by Braden and done. So what it ends up looking like is this piece that we're just showing you, so now it's become a moment. It's kind of like that package thing. And after I can give you guys the email, but we send it to Twitter, who is our partner, and they decide whether or not they want to put it in this kind of area right here. So it's a pitch. So you're pitching basically Twitter being like, I think this news is interesting. It's light. It's fun. I think, something that looks into the Leafs that has it's an exclusive look, and they're going to be the ones that ultimately decide if they want to put you on the page. But it's been a lot of success for us, really. So I would say, we even looking at all the moments that are right now, like we're out here several times. So that's just where it ends up looking.
Yeah, it's super impressive, and less so from my kind of social media manager side, but from the writing side, when I've been writing features every couple of weeks for you guys, when a moment, whether you created it or we've created ourselves, does make it into one of those Twitter suggested pages for traffic, for story performance, it can be huge, and particularly with the right kind of stories,
Yep, and it really just amplifies it. So I'll get into Instagram and TikTok. We're still trying to figure out our
very, very quickly there. Sorry to interrupt, but editorially, how does Twitter how do they decide the Twitter moments? Do you know specifically what their
No, that's a great question. And what I would say is that they have a lot of emphasis in the US. So in the US, when the US, like the New York Times or Washington Post or even like Wall Street Journal, they're pitching ones, which they always do. They have a harder time because there's less people in Canada making these moments. So really it's just us for now. And then the Globe and Mail just hopped on, which is another Canadian paper. But for, somewhere like where you guys are writing from, or even in the EU news, there's not a lot of stuff being put out there. I know BBC does them too, but generally what they like to pick are stories that aren't, okay, so basically for the inauguration, every channel had one. They just picked a New York Times one, basically. But if you had a really cool spin on like the New York Times, Amanda Gorman, the woman who read the poem there, and that was a profile on her, then they would pick that up from a different news agency and put it everywhere too. So it's really just making sure that when you have exclusive stories, when you have profiles like we just put together with Braden's story and all that stuff, those are the ones they really look like a very good human story, I would say. Of course, off the news is important, but even if it's kind of out of nowhere, so like just really breaks up the news cycle. So
it's almost
this one. This is just a profile on somebody, right? And there's not, maybe he's having an album, but he's just a small town musician at this point, right? So we're amplifying his story basically, but it kind of breaks up that news cycle where everything's like COVID, vaccines, all this all American politics stuff. So if you have that really cool nugget that's an exclusive or a good profile on someone, those ones usually will always get put up right away. When I'm trying to compete with other news agencies for breaking news, we still try because we want to make sure, like, let's just say breaking news, Canada approves another vaccine. So I'm racing against all these other people to get that done. Whereas, and they might not even take it just because there's so many people sending it in, but having that thing off the main thing would be something that I think they usually take, if that helps.
And for the guys, like when thinking about Limerick Voice, I could imagine whether it's most likely run through Twitter UK, right, Evie? Then Twitter Ireland, say where the moments are being picked. But like, if you think of, I don't know if you saw this one, Ev, but Kate Devaney's story on Ireland's last traditional matchmaker and kind of how to find love in the 21st century. That's absolutely the kind of Twitter moment that whether I can send you on the link. It's from Limerick Voice, but it's absolutely the kind of moment that I could see a Twitter editor in London picking up. Whether the fact that it came from Limerick doesn't particularly matter,
And also, it's really helpful to be like, okay, so BBC is dominating the UK, and they have other things like Daily Mail and stuff or whatever. They're always making moments, right, all the time. But one thing I would say is that because you're in Ireland and there isn't that space yet, like I would jump on it right away. They will probably take it. Yeah, they'll probably take it just because they perhaps, like, at least what I see from the Canadian side, I haven't seen a lot of global stories from Ireland made through moments. And I think if you guys even just did it as a little project to see where it brought you, I'll give you the email. Perhaps you'll see it blow up, and perhaps you'll see it on your explore page, which is really empowering and really strange and interesting. So it's I'll give Joe the email, and that's the one you pitch to Twitter. So I'll show you guys that later. I'll quickly go through because we don't have that much time, but some of the stuff we're doing. This is just the Toronto Star TikTok. I'll just give you an example of the stuff we're doing.
I'm not sure if it's sharing audio.
The sound isn't coming through on the videos there. Just.
Oh, well. Anyways, so basically she has captions for it, but basically we're making Twitter TikToks, which are a minute long, doing explainers because that's a really easy way to show people perhaps new data, new explainers, how the COVID vaccine rollout is in Ontario, and we just have a person behind it. So these kind of strategies, they're fun and they're great, but they won't bring you back to the website. So let's just say you want page views and you want people to go to the star.com. this isn't the exercise for that, but it's a branding exercise basically of saying, I want younger people, and I know they're on TikTok, and making sure that we're relevant there, giving them news because we have so much expertise. And hopefully when they think of news or they need to use us or they need to find a news source, that's who comes up in their mind. So that's what we've been doing that for. And we've been just trying to see how it works with different faces, different people in our newsroom. And so far it's been a slow grind. There's me, but it's been interesting, and really, like, you guys can tell me if you are Gen Z, they just want to be talked to like adults because they're adults. So they really do enjoy the news that is that's more newsy. Like you can do fun news, you can do dances, and I think there's another space for that for actual creators or influencers. But when it comes to us, they want to see news from us, and that's the feedback I've been given to my own bosses who are in the Gen X or the Boomer age, and they're just like, oh, young people just want to be talked to like adults, which shouldn't be a crazy surprise, but more so than anything, Gen Z is really proving to be very vocal on issues, right? And they want to hear it. So that's been a really interesting exercise, and it's just it's fun, and basically give it a try too, because it's a skill, like I said, that many people are trying to get people to have. They want that, and so whether it's Bloomberg, whether it's BBC, they all are doing that, and they're all trying to find the perfect post in the formula. It's still a really unexplored space, so I would definitely try it and see how that works out. And then on Instagram, we do try to post as much as we can, but again, you know how Instagram works. It's not something that links straight back to the website. So if you want someone to read the story further, that's fine. What we've tried to do with our Instagram is doing like a Humans of New York thing, but for Toronto and Canada. So that's basically what I like: human faces on the Star. I like profiles on the Instagram, and we've been getting a lot better reception with that. Of course, there's room for breaking news. There is room for breaking news, of course. And just to let you know, like New York Times has a 20 to 30 person team just on Instagram, just that app. So like that's how much they also want to understand it, and how much money they put into just Instagram, which is actually incredible if you think about it. So that's also another skill. If you have it, like definitely flex it. I would say that, put that on the resume, say you can do these things. And what's really worked for us are longer captions, but mostly profiles and stories of people. Like people want to see other people. Like that's just something, or food, obviously, because that's just a very human thing. So make this page human, and that's what we do at the Star. But whatever you guys want to make it, it's good to just experiment with that. And the one last thing I'll say is that Facebook is kind of like, for us, really filtering out the type of control that we have on Facebook is 0 to none, just because they're so based in if we pay for marketing, like as the Star, our marketing team, then they'll give us reach, but they have a hold on everybody, every publisher basically. So you can't post the same link twice in 24 hours, because they'll think you're spamming, and then they'll dock you because you're ruining your algorithm. So then perhaps, generally 50,000 to 100,000 see a Toronto Star post, perhaps they'll dock that to like 5,000. So they have just a lot of control that we can't experiment much with. One thing I would say is that if you guys do produce a lot of videos, Facebook does love videos, and they will bump your algorithm up if you share that. But generally, it's not a space that is for experimentation or anything like that. Twitter is a space where you can tweet the same story over and over again, like same link, same everything. And from there, you can really get a lot of feedback and stuff. So, and not feedback, but like you can experiment a lot. Videos, whatsoever. This is one of our photographers, so I'll just retweet this. But yeah, it's kind of like that. And one last thing I'll say is that on Twitter, because it's such an experimental space, we started retweeting our reporters a lot. So you'll see a lot of the stuff is from our reporters, and we think that benefits our site. We know the other news organizations perhaps don't do that, but the bigger ones, New York Times, Wall Street, they all retweet their reporters, whether it's lighter news and interesting stuff like that, or news. It's good for people to know there's a human behind your social channels, and so we aren't acting like we're here and it's run by a computer or a robot, but really, like, we are making conscious choices to retweet certain things from our reporters to keep people informed, to let them know that there are reporters too. So that's something that I would say that we employ in our strategy for sure.
Yeah, this is so great, Evy. And, you know, we kind of half expected that it might go this way, but we've gone a little bit long, but I do want to leave time for the guys to kind of ask some questions. I know you wanted to speak about the Represented by Raptors series. So I guess if we just kind of want to chat through that as a question, like, how have you used in that instance and in other areas, how have you used social media to help your storytelling, whether it's through sourcing subjects or whatever?
That's a great piece, and I'm happy that you were able to, you know, help us edit that piece, because that one, all the participants we found to represent, you know, the diversity of basketball and Raptors fans was all basically through social media, you know. So how did we find the hijabi ballers, a group of women, you know, who are, you know, whether or not they wear hijabs, but they're Muslim and they play basketball. It came from a need of seeing that representation. I didn't feel like they were being seen like that. So for us to find them, that was a simple Google search and a Facebook search. We were looking for GTA Muslim basketball groups. And that's what we came across, you know, really using all the search engines like Facebook and Twitter to find things has been really important and interesting. And one thing I'll say, if you're doing a breaking news or a crime story and you need to find victims, which is something that you will all do in newsrooms, and it sucks and it's the worst thing ever. It's something that I did for, you know, 3 years or 2 years as a breaking news reporter. How to use those tools, whether it's through Twitter or whether it's through Facebook or whatever it may be, is searching the phrases that friends of the victims might be saying. And it sounds crazy, but it takes a lot of empathy to really, you know, think of that. So like, perhaps there was an unfortunate car crash. Like maybe what I would search in Twitter is like friend, you know, RIP. And then basically you can search and set parameters to see, what's the location, you know, when was this sent? And Twitter has all those search tools, but that's really how we find people. We look for certain phrases that we would think people are saying. So if someone's going to report on a racist incident, I'm using those keywords. Like maybe right now, because of the situation, I'll just search like Asian, Toronto, then I'll search it to near me and then find all these kind of people. And then that's where you just spark that connection, talk to them, get them on the phone. And then a lot of the people that we find are through social, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. Guys, if you want to turn on your cameras now, Evy's got like probably 5-6 minutes left.
I can stay till 55. I can stay till 55.
Okay. Yeah. And if any have any questions, just honestly turn on your cameras and shoot away. And whether it's on stuff that we've discussed today or anything else related to social media and news.
Oh, and one thing I would. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So no, you keep going, Evy. I was just gonna.
Oh, and what I would say is like, yeah, it's definitely, you know, what I would say, because here, I guess the industry, I guess across the world is kind of a daunting place, especially for students. And I always say this, that if you are really practice and have these skills using social, understanding how many capabilities it has, gaining experience, that is a very easy way to have more skills than, you know, a certain other person, right? So like, it's a very important thing to have, whether you get into news, whether you get into communications, having those skills like will bump up your, I would say, job prospects by a lot, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Like, this is a ridiculous question to ask someone in their mid-20s, but is there anything you wish you'd done more or less of earlier in your career when you think of where you're at now, and maybe kind of where the guys are at now?
To be honest, yeah, I mean, I was someone who was younger, and also I didn't traditionally see myself in media. I'll be honest, I'm like an Asian woman, so I don't see much of myself represented in what I believe was news. I didn't grow up reading like newspapers like that. It was just, it was different. So what I would say is I would gaslight myself a bit less. You know, I was always thinking like, oh, you know, this reporter must be right, this editor must be right, like he fits your classic mold of what an editor should look like. Or also, you know, saying certain things like, oh, we only talk to the police for sources, when really like I should have questioned that earlier, which I already had questions about. So trying to, you know, take advice where you can, but also make sure that you're out here representing your generation and who you are, you know. So right now we're desperate and so desperate for stories on Gen Z. You know, we have most of our newsroom is a little bit older, so they don't have that kind of connection. It's only really their kids. And so having that is really important, and being like, this is what we care about. We're Gen Z. We care about the environment. We want stories on the environment. You know, you're the future readers. That's who they want to pitch to. So being more confident in myself, definitely.
Cool. There's a few people with hands up there.
Great. I think Devlin was in first. Devlin, could you and Devlin and Aoife and I think who's the other person, Aidan as well, number 3. So fire on. Devlin first.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Hi. I'm the marketing manager for Limerick Voice. So I've been doing all the social media and things like that for the past year now. My question really is, how do you suggest, in terms of social media marketing for a brand like Limerick Voice that wants to be taken seriously and not just kind of viewed as a social student publication? We're not opposed to having fun and experimenting, but do you have any advice for reaching a larger audience than just students?
Yes, 100%. And we have that too with universities here. They have their own student papers and they're always fighting for, space. And what I would say is really try that Twitter Moments thing. I think you might be one of the first out of Ireland. I haven't seen anything specific to Ireland from like their papers that shows their reporting. And I went through your site and I went through your social media. I think you guys are doing a great job, to be honest. And I just think that taking those stories that you have and amplifying them even more, whether it's through a thread, whether it's through creating that thread and making it a moment, that's where people will stop and say, oh, whoa, they're on like the Explore page. That's pretty incredible. And so it's beyond students. We're giving news stories on, I read some of your stuff, like profiles of players who are like super loved and people want to know more about these people. You guys put in so much work to report on these things. I really think that there's a big chance for you guys to amplify your work beyond just students and just being a student paper and thinking way beyond that. So when I talk to the students at Ryerson, which is a journalism school in Toronto, I just tell them, make your TikToks. Like, sure, that's fine. You can tell news through there. I think news agencies will be a little bit jealous that they have, so many young people to represent a great video, on-screen presence. So that's already a win. So don't see TikTok as a loss. They're really trying to scramble to figure out how to get this done. And they're not that great at it because of who's in the newsroom. But I would say if we want to just straight up doing like this story is an investigation, it's serious, try that Twitter thread. And when I'll send you the email, but when you first send them an email and pitch it to them, like sell it to them, be like, this is an important story because it comes from the young voice. It comes from us. And just define who you are. So we're a student paper, but we see ourselves much more than that. Once you make that initial relationship with Twitter, they're way more willing to take your stuff and way more willing to put it out, not only to, just the UK, but if your story spans the world, it goes global. It goes to Japan, it goes to Canada, it goes to the US. So definitely give that a try, I would say.
Great. Thank you so much.
Great. I think Aoife was in there and Lauren. Is there another person? And Aidan and Lauren. So Aoife up next, I think.
Yeah. Hi, Evy. How are you?
Hi.
So I'm just wondering, I suppose, for people who are looking to get into, I suppose, the whole social media side of journalism, I suppose, what's the best way to portray that even on like a resume and stuff, just to make it sound like interesting and show that you are, I suppose, good at social media, if that makes sense?
I would definitely, take, and let's just say you have the skills, that is going to be your top skills, like basically your social media skills, because it is there's such a hole, like they need to figure that out. So definitely have that out there in a skills portion of your resume, I would say. But what I would also say is also, like I think when you do the cover letter, when you do that, always put audience into it, because when you marry social media with audience, I'm here to get you more, more Gen Z people reading your stuff, and more younger, they want that, they need that, they're desperate, and they don't have that right now. And I would say that across the BBC to the New York Times, it's still a struggle. And like I said, they have 30 people working on Instagram just in that newsroom, which is, those jobs came out like this. It went like that in the last 3 years. So there is so much room for you. And in such a industry that has been so devastating, the person with the most skills is able to be, a TikTok on camera presence, has understanding of how Twitter moments work. That's the person they'll keep, and not like someone else who hasn't explored that, unfortunately. So I would put that at the top of your stuff and really start experimenting. And where you can, if you can even do stuff off-site for the brand or for Limerick Voice or whatever, just having that real experience and being able to put that in, like social media assistant, social media manager, or, TikTok, like, just give it bullet points on what types of social media things you've done. And I think that will really escalate, that will bring up the resume 100%.
Perfect. Thanks a million.
Hi, how are you? I was just wondering, how do you make sure you don't like inundate people with your posts on Twitter, like so they don't become bored or annoyed at seeing too much of your stuff, I suppose? Like, do you have like a schedule of like when to post and like only at certain times or what?
So we do once an hour. That's a mandatory for us as a news organization. That's what we've decided. When there's breaking news, we hit the 30 marks too. So 8:30 a.m., 9:30 a.m., but every time for 24 hours, we do it once an hour. The thing about Twitter, which is great, is that I don't think there are obviously cases where people are like, okay, I don't need to see the Toronto Star tweeting the same story like 10 times. It's fair, definitely. But it is a testing ground for us. And what we have found when we have talked to people, even in our own newsroom, is that the way the algorithm shows up and the things you like and things you don't like, if you aren't liking a lot of the Toronto Star's posts, it actually will sort of disappear from your feed. It won't disappear fully, but they'll give you bits and pieces of it. And so Twitter is really good at kind of curating that experience where they used to have ratings on timelines. So you could go down your personal timeline and be like, I hated this thing. And you could rate and be like, no. So we don't mind experimenting a bit more. But we do keep our Twitter moments, which, you know, are the threads of really long things, at 5 a day. And that's the standard. That's half of what the New York Times does, just because we're a small desk. But we also, again, don't want to like barrage the entire timeline with our stuff. So I would say don't worry about it too much, but also, you know, I would say for us, once an hour is important as a daily news publication. But if you're doing something and you guys are obviously busy, you're students as well, maybe 5 times a day is not a lot of tweets. There's some people who tweet like insane amounts. So I think that's kind of a healthy space, to be honest.
That's great. Thanks a million.
Thanks.
Awesome. I think we have one more from Lauren. Lauren's got her hand up, and that might be about it in terms of time, if that's okay. Go ahead, Lauren.
Hi, I was just wondering, would you guys use like hashtags and stuff on your socials like Twitter and Instagram, and especially in like the Twitter moments, do you find that they're effective?
To be honest with you, I'm not a huge hashtag person. I think if you can limit it to 2 hashtags and they're very curated, let's just say it's for International Women's Day. Okay, let's put it in because people are clicking that hashtag and looking into it. But I am not a big believer in doing more than 2. I hardly even do like enjoy 1 because I think it really is distracting for the reader. And it gives, let's just say you want the reader to read your story, like click your link or whatever. You've just given them, I guess, 20 other possibilities if you use 20 hashtags to click something else, right? So for me, to be honest, in terms of getting that traffic through hashtags, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I will do it for days like National Pie Day, and we have like a pie recipe. So if people are looking, that's what they'll find. But I wouldn't do like every word. And we do have reporters that I've talked to who literally hashtag every single word. And it's like, it's hard to read the whole thing. So that's what I would say about it. And on Facebook, apparently it's supposed to help if you do 1 or 2, but we just limit it as much as we can. And when we find it necessary because it's what's trending or you see it in the explore bar, then we'll add it if it really works with that, I guess.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. And thanks for the question, Lauren. Evy, it is 10:57. You've got a meeting at 11. I really appreciate you going over time with us. And honestly, that was absolutely brilliant. It's the kind of thing that, you know, in 57 minutes, I can't believe how much stuff you've touched upon, and I hope it was really useful for the guys. So thank you very much. Just a quick announcement to my guys. We'll meet back in our usual meeting space at probably 10 past the hour, if that's okay. And thanks so much, Ev. Best of luck with the rest of the day. Thank you for making time for us. And if any of the guys want to follow Evy on Twitter, I had sent on her handle and all that. And yeah, I'm sure you can kind of feel free to reach out to her.
And I'll send you the email
on Twitter.
I'll send you the Twitter email.
Yeah.
So if the Limerick Voice wants to try it, that's where you would pitch. And so give it a try. I would love to see that stuff. And yeah, let me know. And thank you guys so much. It was great to meet you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Ev. Have a good one.
Bye.
See you guys. Thanks.